All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Healer's Corner. Tonight we have JD Arici of Infinite Creations with us. We get to have him in person, so hopefully you can hear both of us okay, sharing one mic. But JD, you kind of introduced the whole concept of spirit art to the whole Goddess Elite family. What exactly is spirit art?
In essence, another name for it is intuitive art, but I kind of use both loosely, like intuitive drawing. Um, yeah, it's kind of like, if a reader uses cards, they grab the cards, they see what's in the cards, they know certain things, they feel certain things. It's kind of like that way as in the drawings, but they happen like like in process. So some people will describe it as like it's like having a tarot card drawn for you, except maybe not as fine tuned.
Well, the cool thing is they're reading home with them.
Yeah, because I do a write up that summarizes the message that I'm getting with the drawing or the main point that's trying to come across. When we chat, we elaborate if needed. But I find a lot of the time, especially in the past few years, um, people will read the write up and they understand, and that's it. Um, but sometimes we'll um, have a conversation about it a little bit more, elaborate. Sometimes metaphors don't land quite the way I wanted to. So it's get the idea across. My goal in it is to find what's most needed for that person, what they need to understand. That could be a life lesson, a soul lesson. It can vary quite a bit. Don't generally work as a medium of any kind. It's not something I ever practice, but on occasion, people have told me that loved ones showed up in the drawings, which is typically what spirit drawing is referred to. I just kind of used the name because it was close enough and it was a little more known.
Now, was there a certain experience in life that kind of led you down this path?
Okay. This show is only what, an hour? I used to jokingly call myself spirit spoiled brat. Um, I mean, some people can have like an obvious epiphany moment or just where everything's falling into place. I had many of them to the point where like my stubbornness was not going to stop me. It still trips me up, but it doesn't stop. But let's see, how can I summarize this? I've been trying to summarize it for years. Long story short, I was looking for something more in my life than what my day job was. I moved, new area, didn't know anybody, wound up getting involved in a spiritualist church, which mediumship is part of their service, and healing also. And I just kind of dove in and got involved with the church and took every class that I could. And once people found out that I was an artist, I kind of got nudged to, do artwork. And I always just chalked it up to their being supportive, or whenever I did something and everyone liked it, or most people, um, I thought they were just being supportive. Like I would take everything with a huge grain of salt. But like when I first wound up at that church, the funny thing is the way I found out about it is I went for a reading the day before I went for the first time. The reader is the one who told me about the church. So I go to the church the next morning for the service, and there was a guest speaker that day. So it wasn't even like the regular pastor speaking, up first. It was a guest speaker, and he part of the message service when the day before when I was talking to the woman at the fair, I said I kind of know how this works because I had a little bit dabbled before. I said, but I'm looking for an answer to a yes or no question, which I hate those questions. So, we talked about it, we discussed it, we elaborated, whatever. But anyway, so I go to the church the next day, guest speaker, not even the regular person, and we get the message part of the service, and he's like, "Can I bring you a message?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "The answer to the question you've been posing to the universe is yes." And my jaw dropped. I was just like, I was ridiculous about what I was asking, and I got a dead straight. Um, so I was like, okay, I'm where I'm supposed to be, and just kind of pursued it from there. From that, I just continued based on feedback. I did do some healing classes. I did get my Reiki certifications, and honestly, my attunement in Reiki was probably what opened the floodgates the most. That was where I noticed just like a jump from one point to another. Um, I think that can be like, of course, that's a great way for that to happen, but I think it can happen many other ways. It's just when you experience something that opens your mind in another way, um, it's hard to you don't want to erase that. It's still going to be a part of your
Mhm.
processing.
Some good explanation. But do you find that you're using Reiki while you're doing your artwork?
Um, no, well, that's kind of what I was getting at. It's not I don't think it was necessarily because it was Reiki. I think it was great, and I had some great experience using Reiki. Um, but I think it could have been any modality, any process to put myself in that kind of state is kind of the idea. And then once I experienced that, I just kind of tried to live there. It's a come and go thing. But when I'm working, it's like doing anything. You kind of just this is what you're doing right now. And as much as I can be scatterbrained and ADHD from here to nowhere, when I'm there, I'm focused, and that's all I do. But at the same time, I'm not concentrating. I'm not like I don't have that look on my face like, how am I going to do this? It's more free flowing. Um,
Mhm.
and getting in that state I found very healing, and of course helping other people heal through deeper understanding about circumstances, situations is just, I mean, and that's a great feeling. The feedback that I get has always kept me going.
Now, do you find that doing the spirit art, like how is that different than just regular art? Be it how you feel when you're doing it or
Well, that gets into, well, okay, my philosophy is that creativity and intuition are the same thing. That's just I look at it. I think, like, you'll hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't draw a straight line with a ruler." I think and I go through this quite a bit in the class because it's one of the hurdles that we try and get over. People have an idea about what is a good artist or what is good art when they're little based on how real it looks. These days, I think it's gotten better about stuff like that. It's not as bad, but not as limited. But like when we were growing up, it's like the kid in the class that drew the most realistic thing or had the most detail was the artist. And usually you get
Mm.
you in a class, like a class in grade school, and they were the artists, and everyone else just kind of takes a step back. With the rare occasion of someone who still perseveres even when they're not deemed the artist right away, which those people I really admire. So from a young age, it's based on this realism idea. The skill of looking at something and drawing it, to photorealism is a skill, but it can be learned. It's the creative aspect of it which makes it art. And I think everybody has that. I think it's just people, like, if they followed what they really wanted to do, and not like it's a conscious thought that I want to do this, but like if they just kind of dove into it and experimented with it, they probably wouldn't accept it as art at first. And I've seen this with a lot of people, like, and I'm victim, I subject myself to it sometimes too, that kind of thing, where it's
Mhm.
like, oh, that looks horrible. And other people love it. Um, so it's, art, of course, is subjective, but I don't see a line where the same kind of alignment and vibe that comes through when I'm creating art different than when I'm intuitively getting something. It's just like it's like when you have a good idea pop in your head out of nowhere. Um, Especially if if it's something you're not thinking about, and all of a sudden, bing, it clicks. I think we've all had some type of experience with that. I think it's the same idea. It's just a matter of opening. expanding what you're open to as far as what's possible for you to accomplish or to do.
Now, have you found you've got a favorite medium?
Yes. Most of the work I do is in charcoal because it's on location and it's quick, it's simple. It's a little more, it's probably the more spontaneous. So it tends to be a little bit more reading of like kind of current things going on. With that said, I don't limit it to current things only because I want people to look at it with fresh eyes every time they look at it. And if they see something different in it 6 months from now, then absolutely that was it communicating. Because to me, it's energy just like anything else. So I work in a lot of charcoal. What's I started in is chalk pastels, which I still do, not as much. They're obviously much more time consuming, more supplies. It's more involved. I really don't do it on location. And the reason I started with chalk is because when I dove into doing this, and after I had all these experiences, that I was like, you know, I got a message in a guided meditation after I just lost my job. And one of my spirit guides, if you want to call it that, showed up out of nowhere. And I said, "What do I do?" And she pointed to an easel. And I, like in meditation, in my head, I rolled my eyes. I was like, "Yeah, the whole whatever."
Yeah, I wouldn't see that for you. You wrote this, not even a little bit.
I decided to dive into it, but when I had done art before, I was obsessed with trying to do things realistic. But there's a problem with that for me, is it takes a lot of time and a lot of focus. It's a lot of work. When I'm doing spirit drawing, it's really not work. It's not at all because you're just in a free flow state. I'd imagine it's like what surfing is without the sharks.
Do you find that there are guides, be it yours or your clients, that are kind of helping you channel the artwork?
It's kind of become, it's all blended.
Co-creation.
No, there's a word for it. I can't think of it.
Okay.
But where everything just blended together.
So it could be guides, it could be ancestors,
Yeah,
it could be.
I really got away from defining things. What I found for myself is that putting a label on something gives it boundaries, which sometimes is needed, but in general is restrictive. And part of the way I kind of learned that is, one, I was always an outside the lines person, to some extent, and the more I opened up to it, the more, like, the best things I've ever done, I think, were mistakes. Like, I didn't intend to do it. It kind of worked out that way. So I found that being more free flowing. And what happens is when you kind of just tap the energy like that, I don't think there's really a differentiate. It's not a difference between this or that, or it just doesn't have those kind of things. It's more like just colors blending, and I just vibe it.
Because I know you say you don't consider yourself a channeler or anything like that, but and I've always said, in a way, you are. Just
channeler, I would agree with more than anything.
Okay.
Yeah. Next question.
Maria, you got any questions while I scroll through your list of notes, ma'am?
my list, my booklet. When you say get there, what do you mean by get there? You ground yourself. You did some kind of meditation.
No, I'm too lazy.
I like the honesty. I like the blunt honesty.
Okay. So, and this is my experience. Everyone's experience can be different, but I believe it's possible for everyone. It's just a matter of kind of what you've gravitated towards, what feels comfortable. Again, not big with the rules. So basically, when I'm going to do a drawing for someone, I write their name on the paper. To me, that's what I call my statement of intent. This is me putting out to the universe, this is what I'm doing right now. Let's get to work. And then I let it go and just work. I just, basically, the technique wise, it's holding the chalk very loosely. The second most difficult thing to get past in the workshop.
Yeah, it's not gripping.
You got to get away from that. And keeping a really loose wrist, like, even sometimes just knocking the chalk around on the paper will give you more because it's not restricted. You're not trying to control it. And that's why I gravitate towards more free form with everything. Like getting there is just like, it's not a process to me. It's a choice, if that makes sense. I think that's probably the best way to put it. So like the idea being that you can step into like an energy or a state where you can just flow just by choosing it. And the more you do that, the easier it happens. It's not as much of you have to do these 3 things or those 4 things. And some people that works well. The structure works well for beginning. That never worked well for me. I just didn't think it didn't feel necessary. But then again, things always kind of came easy in that sense for me. So I don't want to, poo-poo anyone else's experience or anyone else's process because we're obviously all different. But I think everyone could get to that point. But there's plenty of times where I'll have TV on while I'm doing drawings just to distract my conscious mind so the rest of me can flow because I'm not thinking about it, what I'm doing. So in that sense, I guess it would be along the lines of channeling, but I think anyone could do it.
Now, you've said before classes that you almost prefer somebody not to have artistic background and ability.
Yeah. It tends to be easier without people who don't like it's someone with some art experience that are usually have the hardest time getting over some of those hurdles because they're trying to draw as they know they can, as opposed to just free forming. And like I can draw certain things just out of my head intentionally, but they're nowhere near like content wise. What comes up in the drawings. That's why I love when something comes through in a drawing and it's really clear that it's just not something I'd ever draw or even know how to. And I mean that by like once in a while, one time I had an elephant come through just so clear. And it's not something I've ever drawn before. And if I try and sit down and draw an elephant, it's going to look way more amateur, like grammar school amateur. Because I don't know the details because I haven't processed it in that sense. But that's doing it with intention, doing it free form. The chalk kind of just takes to the paper and you see what's there, which is literally the whole process. It's that simple. Some people need it to be a little bit more structured, a few more steps involved just for themselves to take it seriously, for lack of a better term.
Have you had any students like have an aha moment or like a emotional, like this is what I've been looking to do?
I think I've had a few of those, a few in all different directions. Some were, there's been an occasion where it was a more dramatic thing, where it was the act of putting the chalk on the paper was brought up trauma. I did what I could to try and help that person with it, but it was obviously a much bigger thing than I was getting able to do in a couple hour class. I've had some people do it. I've had a lot of people surprised with what they were capable of. The other big part of the workshop is the brainstorming. To do true brainstorming, you're just literally just throwing out every thought you can have. So when I'm looking at something in the drawing, there's like all the basic questions to ask. Like many faces show up. And scientifically, I know that we're geared to recognize faces. We're geared to see faces and everything because it's literally, I forget, there's a word for it. I can't remember what it is ever. But I look at those faces and I say, well, what is this face? What's the expression on it? What direction is it looking? What is the experience that it's showing? And that plays into the meaning. The position in the drawing is probably the only structure I kind of follow. Where it's showing up in the drawing has different meanings for me. And you could set that up however you want it. Like in my drawing, if it's towards the left, it's past. If it's towards the right, it's future. Obviously, the middle is present. But I'm sure if I grew up where they don't write from or read from left to right, then it would be different, So I like none of those rules I think are more than just the way I do it.
Now I know one of Maria's questions is like, what can people expect? And it's kind of funny because when I have the time to really talk about you to clients, I explain to them, you're going to sit down with him, you're going to give your name at most. And if you want to talk to him, you're going to talk about the most non personal things out there. Uh,
I don't even want that anymore.
so it's like because you don't want to have any, you want to just channel straight from spirit, universe, guide. You don't want to be
Right.
accidentally or subliminally like geared towards something.
Yes. I'm good at reading people to a point energetically, but also to a point mentally. So, and I think everyone is. I think you learn that in just through your life. And I don't want anything to. It's not that I necessarily think it would ultimately affect the drawing or what I'm seeing in the drawing, though that potential's there. But what it does is that I have to weed out that. Well, is that why I'm seeing that? So it's a little more challenging. So I do a lot of drawings remotely where I never meet the person. I just get a name. And honestly, I don't think the name is even that important at this point. It's just when you choose to do something, you just step into that energy. And again, like I said, when you do it enough, it doesn't need to be a process. It doesn't need to be, an elaborate ritual beforehand, unless that's required for you, unless you need that. And people do for all different reasons. Yeah. So like when I sit with someone at like a show, I just take their name. And I used to chat with people because I'm very social, especially at a show. And then that kind of draws things out and makes things take too long. And then I would let people chat. Now I just ask them to be quiet. And also the thing is, if they're engaged in a conversation, they're not relaxed. So it's a little bit more conducive if they're kind of in an open state, at least for the understanding.
It's like a meditative state while you're
Yeah, or just relaxed, I think is sufficient. It just helps because it's kind of like a clean slate when they experience the drawing or what I'm saying about the drawing.
can they like set the intention like I want the artwork to wrap around my career or my immediate well-being or
I would encourage that, but I would keep expectations in check. The reason being, at face value, if what I do is not going to turn over a skeptic. I'm half skeptic myself. Um,
I think that's healthy though.
yeah,
Yeah.
what I focus on, like my intent behind the drawing, is to get to like the gears that are making the situation happen. And we tend to work in patterns. So the relationship issue is the same as the work issue, or is the same as the last relationship issue. It just tends to be repetitive. And it's also when you're in a certain state of mind, you're gonna between what you project and what paths you take versus the ones you don't are all influenced by where your head's at. So what I focus on is like the key aspects. So to a layperson, it can seem really vague. To someone who's any kind of way, shape, or form on a path of discovery or spiritual understanding, they see what I'm talking about. They identify it with what's going on. Some people just aren't good at that. Like, and we all do it, I guess, to an extent. Like, how many times have you had to tell a friend over and over and over and over and over, and they still don't listen? So what I focus like okay, so let's say it's a work dynamic, and I wouldn't even put it that specific, but it's like a power dynamic, where someone's like walking all over you or taking advantage of you or doesn't appreciate you, all of these things. That can apply to your relationship, that can apply to a whole bunch of situations. So I don't need to know all the personal business that this situation entails. It's more like here's the key pieces of what's going on. And here's the pattern, or like how to solve it. And because what happens is we get caught up in the situation and the aspect of the relationship, how you define yourself, how you define them, how you define you together, what your friends are going to think, all these other things come into play. But when you break it down into, I am doing this, I'm thinking this, how is that working for me? That kind of thing. And what I found is the further you go and the further you go, it's like everything kind of has the same message, but they're more detailed per person. And sometimes things will come through stronger that I'll emphasize than others. And a lot of times what I'll do is when there's a message like that, after the person reads it, I'll make sure they understand it, sometimes rephrase it. And that rephrasing sometimes is the way, ultimately it clicks. Because maybe the way I put it initially they didn't see it that way. So it's just a matter of like changing the scenery, but it's background. It's not the core element. So yeah, I mean, everything being energy, everything is connected, and we have the ability to tap into any of it, all of it, at our choosing. It's just being able to believe that, and not just in a sense of faith, but in the sense of acceptance. There's a difference. And that's kind of also what I try and get people. I also don't point at things in my drawings and put a definition to them. And the reason for that is I'm going to give someone a message that I'm getting. So maybe that's because that's the part they need to hear that I'm going to be able to pick up on. And if they went to someone else, they might get a little something different, maybe something totally different. Often I'll have someone do a drawing. Unless I've drawn for someone before, usually at like a fair, I'm not the first stop. They go to someone for a reading, and I might be the second, sometimes the last. So, and I'll do the drawing and I do the write up, and I'm, don't talk to them whatsoever. And they're like, yeah, that's what they just said, which is again validation for what I'm doing. But
and making sure spirits finally making sure they hear the message.
Yeah,
because you've repeated it now also on paper.
We all have our own library in our heads, and so it'll trigger thoughts or memories or things in my head differently than it would you by seeing the same thing. So I translate the message as I take it into a form. But if I explained it word for word how I saw it, it wouldn't land because it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say it speaks to the dynamic of the situation more. Like what I like to call the mind, body, spirit. It's kind of like syncing up. Like you could be in one direction spiritually, a semi-similar direction mentally, emotionally, and then in your physical world, you're totally off in another direction. You're obviously not aligned. When that happens, they're basically energies fighting in different directions and different effects based on what part of you that is. So the thing about alignment is I've had enough times where I was aligned, but it wasn't like I meditated for 3 days and did all this and that, whatever. It's not that. It's in a moment because it's like a bolt of lightning. It just you're just synced up and you do something automatically without knowing it that was necessary. That could be anything from the words you use in a conversation to, like, what's a good example? Like, catching something before it breaks. Like it could be something stupid. It could be something really significant. I've had moments where I've experienced that. I think most of us have. And I just think it's a matter of recognizing that in a more open sense. Like the idea that when you get all three parts, those three parts of you as a whole in sync, you're capable of so much more than you ever believe. I'm not saying it's easy. Certainly a work in progress here. I was just telling Melissa, for a while, especially doing this kind of work, I was mostly in my head and in the energy and not paying so much attention to my body. And this past year has kind of the final clue by four. So
You've been made to pay attention now.
yeah, ignoring it would be more ridiculous than ever. So yeah, so I hope that makes sense to some people.
Now, Maria, did you have any questions that have popped up while JD's been explaining?
Yes. I think I understand now because I didn't understand before when you said, because I did have a couple drawings that you did for me. And I didn't understand it before that, because when I looked at the drawings, I go, oh, it changed. It's changed. Now I saw a connection between the drawing that you did at that moment to my energy, and my energy is always shifting, flowing, changing. So is that how it may be a drawing that was done at that period, at that time, but since it's connected to my energy, and my energy is always flowing, changing, switching, and expanding. That's how the message could be different. It could be the same painting that you
Yeah,
did
yeah,
like 6 months ago.
yeah.
Because of it's connected to me, it will give me a different type of message. So
That's
it
more.
becomes a very personal painting. I'm looking at it in a very scientific energy. I call it energy scientific way of seeing it. Now I understand because I couldn't understand how the energy shifted.
Yeah, and that's kind of the
It's a connection.
yeah, it's the idea, and that's why, like, if I told someone what I explain to people, if I point at the drawing and say this thing here, that's this, blah 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 blah.
Hmm.
Every time they look at it, they're going to think about what I said. They're not going to just look at it. And when you look at it with fresh eyes, um, and you don't have any identified pieces in it, um, then you're gonna it's very open to seeing a whole nother message. Sometimes over time, as things change,
Hmm.
which you could say at the very least is your perception has changed, but also I think it's chalk on paper, but it's ultimately energy that's there, or the idea that
Yeah.
it's energy. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we can speak to you differently. It's kind of like you
Hmm.
can look. It's like gazing or scrying. Um, it kind of only makes it it helps you make connections in your head to get an understanding.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah,
like I said, now I get it. I understand it because I didn't understand it before. But I have looked at the drawings that you have created, and I said, "Oh, I don't think this is what he said."
Well, and it
I
just
get
dawned
it
on
now.
me. I have here like a drawing that JD did with me or for me. And it's dramatically different from the very first one. And I lost the first one in a fire. So I can't show the comparison. But the fact that even now looking at it, and I haven't really looked at this in many, many months, seeing yet all new different faces, meanings,
Hmm.
over and over. Um, and that's kind of cool that something on paper can keep delivering time after time. I've had this one probably like 2, 3 years now,
at
I
least.
think. And it's quite fun at times just to sit down and see what is new that you've never noticed before.
Yeah,
And what that message could mean now and why it
Mm.
didn't show itself when you
right.
first get it.
Or why you
You know,
didn't see it. Yeah,
yeah,
or why you didn't see an aspect of it.
yeah. Um, I think it's kind of like one of my favorite ones to get because again, it's something you don't have to sit there and try to remember like what did the reader say 2 years ago about something. It's like you can literally look at it and go, oh, well, right now.
You're right, and you could even
Hmm.
read the things that I wrote, and I'm not. Don't send the grammar police after me. Free flow process.
I have a complaint, sir. I have no written thing on the back of mine. I'm going to make you re-examine this
I
one.
know too much. Um,
Maria, how many drawings have you gotten from GD? You mentioned like two. Was it two, maybe three?
Two, two,
Two.
no, two. Yeah.
Now, are they like dramatically different type of messages? So, like in the energy that you
Mm-hmm.
have now, will you get two different
Yeah.
readings looking at it now?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Actually, I pulled one of them out. It's actually in the bedroom right now. I can't get it, but I pulled one of them out last night, and I looked at it, and I said, he did give me a message in the back of that. I said, well, that doesn't make sense now because this is not, So now I understand because of the energy connection to the paper. My energy's there. You connected it to the paper,
Hmm.
and it makes it more personal. But yeah, I
um,
did look at it last night, and I was like, this is not what he said in the back.
yeah. I'll tell people all the time is like, whether put it on your altar or hang it on the wall or stuff it in a drawer and it comes out 3 years, what you see then and to see it like have a whole nother message and see something different is like confirmation on that is just it's awesome. Like it's just
Hmm.
so valid. Um, and that's that like everything I do is based on feedback I've gotten. I have my own impressions of what I do and how I do it and all that stuff, but the feedback really is a fuel for me. Um, because I will second guess every step of the way until I step into that kind of free flow.
Have you had any like past life stuff come up for people in a drawing or soul
Um,
contract?
there's been um, indication or like I'll mention it more casually, like this is kind of like a long term thing. Um, and the patterns that we get into sometimes go back lifetimes. Um, so yeah, it comes up, but like I'm not gonna sit here and say you were this person in your past life. Like it's not. It doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
If that answers.
Yeah, yeah. I was sitting here trying
Yeah.
to think of how to phrase the question. I know I've had to explain to people that in your spirit art, you are not necessarily drawing their spirit guides,
No.
or it is channeled messages in artwork.
All right. I'm gonna tell you a funny story. It's an experience story. And I'm gonna be honest, so don't burn me for it. Um, when I first started doing this, like at shows, I was all up for doing the drawing. I didn't have anything to say about it. So I wound up doing this, relatively small show. It was a good way, but my friend had an in to get me in. So I did it. And it's funny, at one point I did take a spirit drawing class up at Lilydale. Woman by the name of Bonnie White does great work. She's like a medium. Like she does like the whole like legit in that sense.
Mhm.
I do what I do. I would call different, but there's so much similarities in some ways. Um, anyway, I had taken the workshop with her. Just I wanted to make it official when I was guided to do this, um, and she was there. So spirit drawing is not as common as like a reader or a medium.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
and I'm at this relatively small show with someone who's been doing it for years and is like super, got her thing down and is the one I took a class with. But I'm just, giving it a shot, following what I was guided to do. So I do. Okay. So a woman sits down. At the time, I had no intention of doing interpretation. I didn't know what I was just going to do drawing. Here you go. Um, and let people perceive it how they wanted to, which, hey, that's kind of what art is anyway. Um, so anyway, all right, this is a full admission of guilt. I did this drawing. It was a very distinct face. And I didn't know who it was.
Mhm.
And it was just some general scenery in the background, but it was like most of the picture was his face. And I handed her the drawing, and she looked at me, and I'm like, "Oh, I got to say something," and I had no idea. So I tried filling in, and just like trying to. I had no idea. I was flailing. Um, and then she goes, "No, I know exactly who that is," and it was her ex-husband who had passed away,
Mm.
and I had no idea. And I thought I was, I went from, and it's kind of like a good story in faith or trust or whatever. Um, I stepped out way out of my comfort zone, was starting it out, and it worked out. And I was like, okay. And that all happened because along the way, I kept getting signals.
Do you do any sort of protection before doing a session with the client?
Do I? No. That's because I'm me. And I don't mean that like, you know, egotistically. I just know what I need to do. Um, I don't, when I do like the workshops, I kind of set it up as a whatever process you do it. For me, there is none.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
have a parting wisdom, Maria, as we wrap up?
No, no.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for hanging out with us, talking about some spirit art and all the fun that can be had in artwork and messy art. Catch us next week, 7 o'clock, live, if you would like to join us and ask questions for our next topic. So we hope to see you then. Bye, guys.
Bye.